Okay, good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here again on another episode of Without a Box, and I'm glad to have Faith Dafe Joseph and, of course, Benga Borowa. How are you guys doing this week?
We're doing okay. I'm doing okay.
Okay.
Thank you. And how are you doing?
Benga, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. And how are you doing?
Great, fantastic. So, I mean, there are a couple of stories that we're looking at this week. First of which is Mali, the crisis in Mali. First of all, there's a coup in Mali that took out the president. I think he's been released today on house arrest or something. But the crisis in Mali had been brewing for, I think, 2 years now, because last year in April, protests broke out against the president, and it was resolved. And then again, because of elections in April, where many felt was rigged, the legislative elections, it led to a series of protests that eventually has now toppled the government. It's interesting that most of the governments that have been toppled in Africa, Egypt, Tunisia, of course, now Mali, of course, in Libya too, there were protests first before the government was also toppled. It just looks like a straight line between protests and the toppling of government in Africa. It makes you understand why there is so much fear about protest in Nigeria. People want to manage the process so it doesn't go completely overboard. But first of all, Benga, what's your thought about what's happening in Mali? It's been reading with terrorism for a couple of years now. Do you think, that what the military are trying to do is to ensure stability in Mali and, of course, allow some sort of a constitutional democratic process to take place? Or you think these boys are here to stay and they are not going anywhere, even though they say in 3 years they'll be off the scene?
Yeah. So I mean, this was like you're not a prophet, but you kind of saw this coming. We've always wanted to discuss Mali on Without a Box. I remember you trying to put it to the front burner of our conversation. Like, the situation in Mali is serious, especially the security aspect of it and its wider implications for the West African sub-region because of the mass expanse of land where you have ISWAP and Boko Haram terrorists just running free. The French have troops in Mali. I don't know if that has been effective, but this was bound to happen. Or I look at it from the sense of a hard reset. I mean, military governments aren't fashionable anymore. We remember what happened when ECOWAS, what country was it? That ECOWAS had to send troops to remove the government. And once a coup happens, when you remove constitutional authority, you're violating the constitution. The soldiers are meant to manage violence and be in the barracks. They're not meant for governance. But they saw this as a clarion call. Like, look, we can't allow our country to go to tatters. That's what the leaders of the coup said. Like, they couldn't manage the situation, the security situation, with the ISWAP having swaths of land and just killing people in Mali. Mali used to be a very peaceful country, and then the economic situation and widespread corruption, it was one of the reasons they noted. But now they've come, and we see, I mean, it's early days, so it's very early to predict, but they want a sort of arrangement like Sudan had post Omar al-Bashir. You can't hijack a revolution. It's still the people. The vehicle for change might have been the military, but you have to work in the interest of Malians. And that's why they are suggesting a sort of civilian military transitional sort of arrangement. But they've released Ibrahim Boubacar Keita. He was released yesterday, and negotiations are still going on with with ECOWAS and other international bodies to try to legitimize their um, their staying government.
Faith, I
Okay.
know you completely have a disdain for military government. What are your thoughts with what's happening in in Mali, and
In
if this will
Mali.
lead to anything significant?
I mean, first, it's not just having a disdain. It's about the fact that usually, like Benga said, they belong to the barracks. They are to be fighting wars to defend the territorial integrity of the country. By the time they get into governance, somehow it's a bit of too much power for them to leave is hard. So I mean, look at what is happening in Sudan right now. I mean, the Sudanese people have taken to the streets again to say that even the arrangement that they have with the military, where you have civilians and the military sharing power, it's not working. And they feel that, you know, things are not improving, and they are protesting again and saying that there has to be some sort of renegotiation. Now in Mali, the military, they're saying that they're going to be there for maybe like 3 years or something, some sort of transitional government. ECOWAS wanted Keita to be reinstated, but I mean, according to Malians, I say even he doesn't want to come back. But the fear is when the military comes in, will they leave? Do they ever really leave? I mean, I think that is a very genuine fear, because a lot of the time they just stay put. And even when there's some sort of sharing formula, at the end of the day, it just never is the same thing as when you have democratically elected leaders. You know, no matter what anybody thinks about democracy, the truth of the matter is that we can do this, we can do a lot of other things because of democracy. The military, they were not elected. So at the end of the day, they should not be there to govern. That is not their job. You are there to defend territorial integrity. You are there to make sure that the country is safe. So the people who led the revolution, the people who protested, why don't you look for some transitional government with those people? Why does the government military have to be involved? They're involved in Sudan. The Sudanese are still protesting that it's not working. And it looks like nothing is going to happen like that in Mali. I don't see
So,
headway.
sorry, can I jump in here?
So
I would like to respond to you.
yeah,
I would like to respond to what Faith just raised. So the military always look at themselves as, you know, it's the last resort. They're the guardians of the people. When all authority is broken down, they would always be there to protect the people. They have the people's interests at heart. And students of history would know that it's not always the case. So, do we give them a benefit of doubt? We know the situation in Libya. I'm sorry, in Sudan is totally different from the situation in Mali. But our military government is still a military government. But what do you do in a situation where civilians don't respect constitutional limits? They There's widespread corruption. Look at the situation in Guinea and Ivory Coast as we speak. Alassane Ouattara and his Guinean counterpart, Alpha Conde, they want to force a third term against constitutional limits. They have this sit tight mentality. So when you're pushing the envelope and you think, you know, you could get away with these things, after all, I'm civilian. Why are civilian governments always blameless? When you create the crisis, I mean, look at what Boubacar Keita created this whole mess, not by himself, but there are things they could have done. So when the civilians lift the mess, create the mess, who's there to fix it? I'm speaking in an ideal situation where, you know, we have a benevolent military that will come and have a hybrid arrangement with civilians and, you know, try to fix the situation. But it's always never the case. But civilians create these problems. Alassane Ouattara, Ivory Coast, Alpha Conde, Guinea. There's a time bomb, there's a ticking time bomb in those two countries that could lead to violence and chaos. And then when the military takes over, after, you know, civilian presidents refuse to respect their constitutional limits and leads to a breakdown of law and order, would you blame the military for stepping in to clean things up?
I mean,
Can I?
Benga,
Okay.
you say this, which makes a very you make a very interesting point that at the end of the day, civilians have a way of creating all of this mess across Africa, which gives opportunities to the military boys to take over, whether it's Zimbabwe, Sudan, Central African Republic. Civilians are always creating a hell of a mess. And I'm here wondering whether the kind of leadership we have in Africa are leaders who were never ready for governance, or leaders who are surprised by the amount of work that they need to do or required to lead a country. They seem to be like a kid in a candy shop, suddenly super excited with what power can do, and they suddenly lose sight of the responsibility that comes with it. But where I'm
I,
going to now is
hmm,
Mali is a critical state in the Sahel region that is reading with insecurity. In fact, if you look at the history of Boko Haram, you will see that certain leaders in Boko Haram, even Al Banawi, I think, was trained in Mali, and they fought in the 2012 uprising in Mali. So we have fighters who trained in Mali, who came back to Nigeria to fight on the side of Boko Haram. So you have this huge movement of terrorists across the Sahel region, from Mali to northern Chad, of course, Niger, and down to Nigeria. It's also interesting that there's a Fulani group in Mali who are also under persecution. They are farming and hunting communities that are hunting and killing down Fulanis in Mali, who are also running away um, down to Niger and Chad, and some of them are also coming into Nigeria. So it's a huge
Yeah.
mess in the Sahel region. And I'm wondering, the French have over 5,000 boots on ground. The Americans also have a couple of boots on ground in the Sahel. First of all, how come 25,000 soldiers from the international community seem not to be able to make a difference in terms of security in that region? And number two, how come member states of this country have not found a way to deal with the smooth sale of criminals across their border states that is causing a lot of trouble, especially for us in Nigeria? What do you think needs to happen? I know former President Jonathan has been there twice now, but what needs to happen for us to have some sense of security in Nigeria first, and some sense of security in the Sahel? Because as it just looks like the French are just observers waiting for these terrorists to come as close as toppling the government in Bamako before they try to intervene.
Mm.
I mean, I would say this. At the end of the day, nobody can fix Africa if Africans don't try to fix it. So we have ECOWAS, we have the AU. At the end of the day, what are these two organizations doing? I know that there's a huge reliance all the time on international communities, like foreign governments in the West, to coming and do something. Like you said, there are soldiers that are there, but what difference has it made? But I want to quickly go back to the issue of military role, if you would permit me to do that just for a few minutes. Let's look at our history here in Nigeria. We've had military role over and over and over and over again. We have not had a benevolent dictator. I don't even think that exists anywhere, because if you open, that curtain, you see some other things lurking there. So I don't think that yes, civilians create the mess, but we also have to create institutions, which we have not been able to do in Africa. It's really funny that the entire continent, there are no strong institutions anywhere. Now, sometimes you look at it that there might be some foreign interference, maybe even wicking that, so that there is always some sort of crisis going on in Africa. But if we do not develop institutions, and if the AU and ECOWAS, they don't step up, we can keep looking for foreign intervention. But at the end of the day, people fight for their interests. So they have to see what is at stake and what they can get out of it before we think that. I mean, and this is just me speaking candidly, that at the end of the day, what are they getting out of it? They probably have sat down and thought about it. Okay, so if we intervene so fully here, what do we get? Don't forget that there's crisis all over the place, all over the world right now. You're looking at what's happening in Venezuela. I mean, at the end of the day, international community sat back. There's only so much you can do. Look at what is happening in Belarus. You can just put sanctions there. The guy is like the last dictator in Europe. There's only so much you can do as, a sovereign country, is going through their mess. I don't know. I don't know how much you can do if the people themselves are not willing to do a lot. Like I said, ECOWAS, AU, they need to step up. You can't keep relying on what the West is going to do because it hasn't helped so far. The West did what they wanted to do in Libya. Look at where we are. So we have to stop waiting.
I don't know if I can jump in here. I do agree with Faith that we have to fix our homes. We need to fix Africa. And even if the EU or international organizations if they're so what's the word? They can be so altruistic to want to fix Africa better than us. We can walk a mile in another man's shoes and feel the same way he feels. You asked a very important question. You have all these troops. There's a French garrison, 25,000 French troops. And then, I mean, it's still the wild, wild west in Mali. You have all these transnational terrorist organizations running wild. So why are these boots on ground? There are elements of neocolonialism to it, and the rules of engagement are definitely different. So why do you violate a country's sovereignty? Why do you have boots on ground? It's a shameful thing to have foreigners come clean your own home, first and foremost. But there's also economic and business interest. Once they threaten French security, French business interest, then you will see the rules of engagement. So right now, I believe it's just Malians or Malians. I need to be careful not to put the R. Malians and Malian violence. So that's why I'll tell you a story about Arriva, French nuclear giant. It is said that Arriva, for every 3 light bulbs that are lit in France, Arriva is strategic. It's a national security economic is of importance to the French. So they have a French garrison in Niger because they mine. I mean, they mine most of the uranium they used to mine. Most of the uranium they used to power French power stations are mined in Niger Republic. So there's no way they are going to allow that go or allow terrorists to attack them. That's why. So they have boots on ground for French interests, French strategic interests, French economic interests, not because they really care about Mali. So, like back to what Faith said, until Africa looks inward and we fix ourselves, and we have leaders that really care about Africans and their people, then we would always have to look outside for solutions to our problems, which is quite unfortunate.
Wing, I like your point about the fact that this, so-called foreign boots on ground are simply there to protect foreign interest and foreign installations. Whether it's the guys in Djibouti or the guys in Niger, they simply are protecting foreign interests. Exactly. So, I mean, before we move to the next story, because I'm extremely worried about what we're seeing across the continent and the implication of the collapse in Mali and what this means for other weak governments across the Sahel region. And you guys have emphasized the fact that it's been impossible for various or certain African countries to build strong institutions. And we all know that it takes individuals to build these institutions. How is it that countries like Botswana have been able to build, fairly solid institutions, and they've progressed quite fairly in recent years? And it does look like many other African countries have completely failed to replicate the kind of institutions that we see across, Central and Western Europe. Why is it so difficult for us? Why is there so much emphasis on the big man the orga at the top, and very little emphasis on institutions. I mean, take a look at what happened 2 days ago. The IG of police issued a statement reported widely in the papers that they should not disqualify anybody for certificates, for age or appearance or anything. Just recruit 10,000 people without any standards. So we're crying about a police force that is highly
Not
brutal,
fit for
highly
purpose.
insensitive to Nigerians, um, to put quite bluntly, highly incompetent. And yet we're in a position where the IG of that same institution is saying, you know, just hire 10,000 people. No need for standards. Just bring in anybody into the police. Why do we keep getting to this point where we have an endless affair with mediocrity and cannot do the heavy lifting of building institutions and maintaining setting standards so that we can begin to make considerable progress in Africa?
I'll let Faith go first.
I mean, I don't, honestly, Ayo, that question, I have no answer for it. Why we have not been able to build institutions in Africa? Because, I mean, speaking from the Nigerian perspective, we have had successive civilian governments, right? Elected governments, and still no institutions. You know, at the end of the day, it is always the strong man. Africa stays begging for strong men. We have a save us mentality, you know, so we expect one strong man to come in and wave his wand and everything becomes okay. I don't know why we are like that, because it is interesting that when Africans step out of the shores of Africa, they start to think differently, you know, and so maybe it is some sort of reorientation we need. I don't know, because we have not been able to really do that. Building institutions is just not the African style. We just want a strong man just coming, save everybody. I don't know why, you know, so I'm kind of like befuddled, just like you.
I
I have
see
no
I
answer.
see an interesting comment that says the schism probably being experienced in Africa could be a fallout of colonialism, and the present border system, the 1865 Berlin Arrangement is probably the reason for this fallout.
It is
Benga.
possible.
Yeah,
It is very
but
possible.
if I could come in here, Otto von Bismarck and his buddies sat in Berlin and drew arbitrary borders across Africa. So he got a couple of, they said, this the new frontier. We're going to civilize them. We're going to commercialize. We're going to colonize. You know, there was no single black man or no single African in the Berlin Conference. None of the millions of Africans that will be affected as a result of what happened after that were consulted. So you have arbitrary borders. If you look at the map of Europe, Switzerland and Germany, Austria, they have natural borders. Countries are separated by, mountain ranges. You have rivers. If you look at the map of Africa, we have lots of straight lines. So those guys said, okay, this is Africa is the big cake. You have a slice like this. Look at Libya, a lot of straight lines. And then they forget that Africa didn't. We had civilizations, we had business, we have thriving cultures, we had dynasties that have evolved from time immemorial. But because of, I guess, superior military power, or I don't know what motivated the Europeans to think you could just go around the world conquering people. But we're not going to spend time blaming the white people. This year is a very significant year. About 12 African countries, more than 12, got their independence in 1960. So it's 60 years post-colonialism. I know there's neo-colonialism and business interest and other pressures, but I don't want to keep blaming Otto von Bismarck, colonialism. I mean, we cannot dismiss it because the hangover, we're still suffering from the hangover. And the hangover is from, the white man on the hill. One person talks, you listen, Messiah complex, and all of that. So is democracy a one size fits all? system of government that will work. If you look at the Asian tigers, for example, Lee Kuan Yew, he was president of Singapore for over 30 years. His son is the current president of Singapore. Uh, Mahathir Mohamad was president of Malaysia. He was prime minister of Malaysia for over 20 years. He came back a few years ago and was the oldest in his 90s, and he was still prime minister. But Paul Kagame, Rwanda, what these people have in common? And let's look at traditional African institutions, the Oyo Messi, the Oyo Empire, for example, or the great empire of Zimbabwe or Benin. They didn't vote for their kings, it was hereditary. So it kind of, we, that big manism, that, let that man be the institution, we kind of like it. That's why military rule was so fashionable. So you just have to pray that you get a Sankara or you get a Paul Kagame or you get a benevolent. Faith doesn't like to hear this, but I know it's just how
we 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 can talk about these African issues all day long,
yeah.
if you allow me. So, but because we're pressed for time, I'd like us to quickly coast through the story of the United States. We saw 2 days ago, or was it 3 days ago, a police putting 5 bullets through the back of a young seven bullets through the back of a young black African who walked into the car to meet his 3 young sons. This is just coming barely 2 months after George Floyd's widely televised and widely protested murder by the police. What is really going on here? Because I mean, everybody will tell you there are 2 things you should never copy from the Americans: their health system and their policing system. I mean, for a country as civilized as America, I would argue that they have a police system that is quite reflective of the third world country. But if you look closely, at what is happening, because just a day before that killing, there was a 17-year-old, who killed, I think it was 2 people, with an assault rifle, two people, and yet was treated with some sort of dignity after he was being arrested. And then you put 7 bullets in broad daylight on the back of an innocent man who did not, as far as we could see in the video, pose any immediate threat or danger to you. What exactly is happening in the United States of America? And so that you can take this all in one, do you think that President Trump and the Republican Party are trying to use law and order? Because Trump has refused to comment on that killing. He's ignored it, even though the press have pressed him to speak to the issue. He would rather talk about the walking out of stadiums by NBA superstars, but will never speak on that brutal murder that we saw on our television. Do you think it's a strategy by the Republican Party to ride on law and order and to play the identity card in the coming elections in November? Or you think there's some method to this madness? Because I cannot understand what's going on here. Maybe Wenger, you can help me with it.
So the method to this madness, and I like that you ended with that sentence, so I'll pick up from where you stopped. There's a method to this madness. Trump doesn't care about you and I. Trump doesn't care about rational thinking people. Trump doesn't care about science. Trump cares only about himself. So you have a narcissist in the White House. All he talks about is ratings. It's me, 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 me. He blames people. He doesn't take responsibility. He doesn't know the enormity of his office as president of the United States. And the last 4 years, I mean, you've seen him rip out the P5+1 nuclear deal with Iran. The European partners were happy. Iran has stopped enriching uranium. He threw that out of the box. President Barack Obama left him a handbook on how to handle exactly what they're going through, the pandemic. He threw that out of the window. But let's not talk about, I mean, we could go on. This is an entire dossier of how he's been wrong. So there's a method to the madness, and back to that. He's appealing to his base. He knows that they would defend him. It's almost a cult. It's like Jim Jones. It's a cult. So when people are in a cult, their leaders can't do wrong. If he said it once, like, you know, if I shoot someone in on the streets of New York, I'll probably get away with it. So they are not rational people. So this is a case of saving. I mean, the elections are about saving the soul of America for what America is, and even international partners, international, you know, the diplomatic world have not seen America get this. So it's a divide and rule. America has never been this divided, and then you have an individual that lies all the time. So he gave his acceptance. He accepted the nomination. He violated the Hatch Act using premises of the White House for his campaign and all of that yesterday. And he didn't even mention the one of the most burning issues in the country, the gentleman that was shot in the back. He doesn't talk. He picks what he wants to talk about, whether you like it or not, and it goes. So Trump doesn't care about being politically correct or decency or standards. He's a narcissist. He's all about himself, and he will do anything possible to return to power. We've seen how he's tampering with the United States Postal Service. So it's
Hmm.
left to Americans to decide in
Interesting
November if
point,
they want.
Wenga. Very interesting point you make. Faith, it looks to me from where I'm sitting, I would have ruled Trump out, after the coronavirus, the way he's handled the coronavirus, 180,000 people dead. A group of Republicans who have formed the Lincoln Project to protest against Donald Trump. Kellyanne Conway will be resigning from the White House at the end of the month, largely because her daughter is sick of the way her mother and her dad are taking it out on themselves in public. But it looks from where I'm sitting that after all the cries and howling, it looks to me like Trump will be elected again in November. Because all of this seems like some grand ploy. What I think Jay Tapper yesterday talked about, taking right out from the Nixon playbook. Do you think that all of this adds up to a Trump re-election, or I mean, help me make sense out of this.
I really don't know. Even Americans can't make sense of what is happening in their country right now. That's the truth. Nobody can. Um, Once somebody was asking if this is really what America is, or how the country really is. I think we're seeing the underbelly of America. Trump is showing us that these people exist. Somebody actually said that Americans are tired of pretending to be the moral high ground in the world, and so they're like, we're done. Can we just show who we are? So it is going to be a battle of who we think they are now and who they've always claimed to be. So the battle for November will be, do we have enough people who are claiming Americans are really morally upright people who will choose right and wrong? Or is this really America that they have tried to hide all this while, but Trump has just exposed? That is what we will find out by November. So, like I said, nobody can really predict where this election is going. Joe Biden has momentum right now, but we don't know. Like America is funny, and there's still a couple of months before the election. You were asking
And
him if
then
he
the
was going to
electoral
write
college
an
system
order.
too.
What?
Electoral college system. Hillary actually won
Exactly.
the
That is
popular
also
vote.
there. That is also there. Trump actually wants to write on law and order, because he keeps saying that this is what you get when you put Joe Biden there. It is interesting because that is like shooting yourself on the foot. But here's the thing: he has people who are not going to think through that. He has supporters who are not thinking through that. One of the biggest supporters for Donald Trump are the evangelicals, right? And for those people, they're not thinking about whether it is morally right, whether it is logical. They're just thinking he supports my bias. He's going to help me get the things I want, which is, make sure that abortion is illegal, make sure that gay people don't take over, because there's that fear. I don't know where it's coming from, that gay people want to
There's
take
an
over their
agenda.
lives, or that black people want to take over, Latinos want, they just don't want to see minorities take over. So at the end of the day, those people will always support Trump, because they're not thinking about his morality right now. They're not thinking about his lying. They're just thinking about, does he serve my purpose if I have him there? That's basically what it is. And that's why they're voting for him. So, like I said, to be a battle of, is America really what they said it was? That they used to show us, that they portrayed in movies, that their former president tried to show? Or is this really America?
Hmm. Very good question.
Interesting.
Very good question. I mean, at the end of the day, I think it was Francis Fukuyama, I mean, the brilliant political scientist, who argued that identity is such a pool that it dulls common sense. People are so drawn to the group
Mm.
identity thing that they can't think rationally, at the end of the day. So I think we have 5 more minutes left, and I'd like us to quickly look at the social media bill. I think I saw something like a news report or a story that said it was going to be passed by the National Assembly in its entirety, especially with the obnoxious clauses in the bill. Lai Mohammed was on tape um, disclaiming that there was any bill of some sort in the National Assembly. He's completely denied it, even though we know that that bill does exist. He tried to flip it around to say that, of course, it didn't originate from the executive. It's something that the National Assembly came up with by themselves. Are you guys worried about a social media bill, especially seeing that, for instance, a young social media blogger, or what you're going to call him, who ran a parody account and was picked up by security agencies for running a parody account on the former president of Nigeria, and it was locked up for close to 90 days. Wasn't charged to court, it was just detained arbitrarily, and it was just released sometime last week. We see a lot of these incidences happening on social media where people tweet something, that offends somebody in government or somebody in power, and then he's picked up in the dead of the night, just tap away, and he's locked up for several weeks, if not months, without trial. What do you think the social media bill will do? Wouldn't it worsen it at the end of the day and open a lot of people to more arrest? And yeah, before I forget, I want to add this. Do you think that the ground has already been softened for this bill to pass? I say this because you would also notice that in the last couple of weeks, a lot of people have been accused wrongly on social media. The normal parlance, where they say they have been dragged off on social media
Yeah.
for what they did not do. And so maybe 2 weeks later, the truth comes out. And I mean, the damage has been done already. People have been falsely accused of rape. We saw somebody who committed suicide on social media. Do you think all of that has prepared the ground for people to have a rethink and say, okay, maybe we really need to regulate social media? Because at the end of the day, I think I'd also protect myself from some crazy person who's going to try to bully me online or try to slander me online tomorrow. Do you think that is also playing out in the social media space?
So, I mean, on paper is different from reality, and I'm sure Faith would agree with me. Implementation and the nexus, the environment in which we operate in. Nigerians don't have Norwegian sensibilities. The life of the Norwegian legal system, Norwegian law enforcement, they are, I mean, if you have one thing on paper, its implementation is different. But if you take this social media bill to Japan or Norway or Singapore, for example, it would be implemented, I mean, verbatim as the law prescribes. We already have a situation where, I mean, we have laws on defamation, we have laws on that are adequate enough So we don't need a social media bill per se. And those clauses that are, I mean, those ones that would trample on personal freedoms and, stamp on freedom of information and speech should be taken out. But however, we have a problem. I mean, just look at coronavirus, for example. We're dealing with an infodemic and a pandemic at the same time. People do not understand the impact of fake news. Fake news costs lives. I used to work for Nigeria Info. We had a sister station, um, Wazobia FM in Kano. It was shut down because of fake news, because a guest came on the show. It was shut for about 2 years. People then ended up leaving. The station was shut because of fake news. Somebody came on air. They had a guest, and the guest went on to say, immunization is caused by, this polio vaccine that they're giving people is population reduction strategy. All this conspiracy nonsense that people come up with. And they started killing people that were healthcare workers that were carrying out this inoculations and administering the vaccines. So it has real life consequences. And we've seen the way Nigeria is, how people abuse privileges. You go dig out pictures and then you say this thing happened here. The fake news travels fast, but we need to just be responsible, and we need to educate the populace, because if this social media bill passes, we're just going to use it. I mean, look at our democracy. Democracy looks good on paper, but are we, enjoying democracy the way the Scandinavian countries? Do our elected leaders care about the commonwealth that we've handed to them? So it's the same way they would use this social media bill to stifle opposition. So it's more. I would suggest a campaign of educating people on the implications of fake news, and letting people be more responsible, and then lawsuits, defamation of character, clamping down on people that spread fake news. Let there be consequences for it. Yeah.
Faith, take it home for us.
Okay, so first, social media bill, the fact that this was something that garnered a lot of outcry, and a lot of people were opposed to it. During the public hearing, there was opposition to it. The fact that it might be in consideration by the National Assembly is scary alone, because what it means is that we do not have a National Assembly that actually represents us, right? And that is a problem. Yes, fake news is a problem. We need to tackle it, but like Benga mentioned, we have other kind of laws that can suffice where this is concerned. The problem is, by the time you put this there, will it not be abused by the people who are putting that? Is it not, does it not have some sort of agenda, like targeting certain people because they feel that this is a way to clamp down on people? Here's the thing: we need free speech. If we are going to have a democracy, let's have a democracy which guarantees freedom of speech. Now you can tackle fake news, you can tackle whatever else you want to tackle with the other laws. We have cybersecurity laws, we have laws against libel and defamation, things like that. Use those ones. You do not need to have a special law that you have designed in a way that it seems targeted. And if the National Assembly goes ahead to do this, it's time to start asking questions. If people are against it and you are supposed to represent us, why would you go ahead and do it? We're talking about other laws that it looks like the National Assembly is trying to push. You're looking at the National Water Resources Bill. You're looking at the CAMA that people say, oh, it's not that much of a big deal. But here's the thing: what kind of public hearing goes into this? What kind of, do they listen to the people? They are supposed to be our representatives. So for me, it portends a bigger problem of the National Assembly themselves. What are they doing? What are they about? So it is not just looking at this, because if this works and it passes, remember there's a hate speech bill that is also going to go on, and then the National Water Resources Bill is going to go on. Where does it stop with our National Assembly? That is a bigger problem, in my opinion.
So, if I could just throw this into the mix, yeah, democracy. on paper. You could recall we have access to our representatives. We've handed over our Commonwealth to them as a people to do work in our interest. Why does it seem like we're so powerless? Faith, I like the angle your professional life, in your daily, you do a lot of, you liaise with the National Assembly. You've interviewed so many senators and members of House of Representatives. So I'm directing this question to you because you're in the nation's capital, Abuja, and you're in the seat of power. You understand how these things work. But why does there seem to be a disconnect? How do 360 members of House of Reps and 109 senators make decisions and pass laws over 200 million people? And without, didn't they consult? Why do you think there's a disconnect? And why do you think the average Nigerian is powerless? They do not call up their representatives. They do not even, they can't even identify them. There's so much hopelessness. And why is there this gap?
I mean, I would say this. I think it's also a lot of cultural difference, in Nigeria, so that they're representatives of certain parts of the country. Because I do not want to start mentioning, regions. That there are things that they do that their constituents totally support, But here's the thing: an uneducated citizenry cannot dictate anything. So yes, you represent me, but I don't know anything. I don't know any better. So the problem is this: a lot of Nigerians don't know what they're supposed to get. They don't know what they're supposed to demand for. Do you understand? A lot of people are hungry and uneducated. So holding your lawmaker accountable when you have not eaten, it's perhaps not the top of your list. So as long as people are impoverished and they're uneducated, you will have people continue to take advantage of them like this, which is what our lawmakers continually do. I mean, like you said, ask them questions all the time, and I'm trying to even verify this particular story. But you know what? They go around and they tell you that it's not just me. I have other people, and if I say no, it doesn't change anything when you have the majority saying this. That's what they keep saying. But they have also made the process of removing your senator or your House of Representatives so tedious that you don't even want to go through with it. And as long as people are hungry and uneducated, trust me, holding people accountable is the least of your worries. You just want to pay your children's fees. You want to eat. You want to make sure that you can pay for hospital bills. You want to send your children to school. You're not thinking, what is this person doing for me? That's what they're taking advantage of, and that's why they keep people impoverished. You can't ask for accountability when you're hungry.
Fantastic conversation, guys. Fantastic conversation. We're out of time, and we have to do this again next week, Friday. So in 20 seconds, what stories are we going to be looking at? What stories do you guys have your eyes on that we probably might be talking about next week, Friday? 20 seconds, guys.
Social media, Bill. I need to verify the story, and of course get back to you on that. Definitely.
No problem.
Yeah, I mean, Africa has weathered the storm so far. It's not yet Uhuru. I'm talking about coronavirus and Nigeria. When is this night curfew going to be lifted? Because it seems to be only benefiting a few people. What's the rationale and science behind keeping people? There's a night economy in the commercial nerve centers, Port Harcourt, Abuja. People are really suffering. So at what time do we start easing this restrictions, or are you just punishing people for no reason? Is there a science behind it? Is there a time frame? And I mean, just the whole corona situation in Africa and Nigeria, to be specific.
Fantastic. And I think I'm going to be looking at this. There's a water bill. I haven't looked at the details of it. I saw Wole Soyinka on the front page of the newspapers today, crying foul. So I think I'm going to be taking a critical look at the water bill and see how the states are supposed to control, the entire waters in the state. I mean, I don't know clearly what that means, but I'll take a look at it. So fascinating conversation, guys. Y'all should go enjoy some Friday night.
I'm going to cook,
See you again
actually.
next.
I'm going to cook.
It's been an
Bangasu.
absolute pleasure, as usual. And when I'm in Abuja, we would share the same system. So I'll be with you. We'll do
Okay, I hear
out
you.
for the back together with some delicacies. Yeah.
I hear you. No problem.
Yeah.
All right,
Take care,
guys.
guys.
Bye.
Have a fantastic weekend.